turn to Muhammad and the rise of Islam. And if you've been to some of the New St. Thomas Institute webinars or you've seen some of my writings before, you know that I do not take a politically correct approach to Islam. And in this video, you will see Muhammad and Islam and all of its errors in full color. In order to kick this off, I want to start with St. Thomas Aquinas. He's our patron of the New St. Thomas Institute, and he has a great quote about Muhammad, and it goes like this. Quote, "Muhammad seduced the people by promises of carnal pleasure, to which the concupiscence of the flesh goads us. His teaching also contained precepts that were in conformity with his promises, and he gave free rein to carnal pleasure. In all this, as is not unexpected, he was obeyed by carnal men. As for proofs of the truth of his doctrine, he brought forward only such as could be grasped by the natural ability of anyone with very modest wisdom. Indeed, the truths that he taught, he mingled with many fables and with doctrines of the greatest falsity. He did not bring forth any signs produced in a supernatural way, which alone fittingly gives witness to divine inspiration. For a visible action that can only be divine reveals an invisibly inspired teacher of truth. On the contrary, Muhammad said that he was sent in the power of his arms, which are signs not lacking even to robbers and to tyrants." End quote. So Thomas explains that Muhammad, first of all, created a religion that was based on carnal pleasures. Thomas is speaking here primarily of sexual lust. And as we'll see as we go through the life of Muhammad, we'll see how that plays out both in his own life and in his doctrine. And then how Muhammad didn't bring forth any supernatural signs. All the prophets of the Old Testament produced miracles, produced signs. Even the apostles themselves produced signs. And this is God's way of confirming a message as divine. Muhammad did not work miracles. And instead, Thomas said, Muhammad only brought the power of arms, weapons, and soldiers to bring about the proof of his doctrine. And of course, tyrants and thieves can also do the same thing. So it's no proof at all of the divine origin of Islam or the prophecies of Muhammad. So let's take a look at the life of Muhammad and how it unfolded over time. In 570 AD, Muhammad was born. When Muhammad was about 9 or 12 years old, he met the Christian monk Brother Bahira in the town of Basra in Syria during his travel with a Meccan caravan, accompanying his uncle named Abu Talib ibn Abd al-Muttalib. When the caravan was passing by the monk's cell, the monk invited the merchants to a feast. They accepted the invitation, leaving the boy to guard the camels. Brother Bahira, the Christian monk, however, insisted that everyone in the caravan should come to the feast to eat. It was allegedly a miraculous moment of a cloud that kept showing Muhammad regardless the time of the day. The monk revealed his visions of Muhammad's future to the boy's uncle Abu Talib, warning him to save the child and protect the child from the Jews and from the Christians. Allegedly, Bahira found the announcement of the coming of Muhammad in the original unadulterated Gospels, which he possessed and that other Christians did not possess. And this is the standard Islamic view, is that Christians corrupted the Gospels in part by erasing all references to the coming of the future Muhammad. So in 595, Muhammad marries his first wife, Khadijah. He was 25 years old. She was 40. So she is the original Arabian cougar. And they would have 6 children together. In 610, Muhammad receives, allegedly, a prophetic ministry from an angel of light. This is important because Paul says that Satan sometimes appears as an angel of light. Muhammad was worried that he had encountered Satan. And so he told his wife, and his wife told him, and his wife was some kind of a Christian, probably one of the heretical sects. His wife told him, oh no, this is the Archangel Gabriel from the Christian Gospels. The Archangel Gabriel who spoke to the Virgin Mary. So 3 years later, in 613, Muhammad begins his public ministry in the city of Mecca. 7 years later, in 620, Muhammad has his night journey to Jerusalem, a mystical vision. And 1 year later, Muhammad marries Aisha. She's a 6-year-old girl. Let me repeat that. Aisha, when she marries Muhammad, is 6 years old. But, according to Islam, she waited 3 years to consummate the marriage with Muhammad. So she was 9 years old. Muhammad consummated a marriage with Aisha when she was 9 years old. And I'm going to read a quote here from Sahih al-Bukhari. It's narrated by Aisha. Quote, "That prophet married her when she was 6 years old, and he consummated his marriage when she was 9 years old, and then she remained with him for 9 years, that is, until his death." The next year, 622, is the Hijra, Muhammad's emigration to Medina. And this also marks the beginning of the Islamic calendar. We Christians use AD, Anno Domini, the year of the Lord. Muslims, you'll see in English literature, AH, after the Hijra, which was in 622. In 630, Muhammad returns to Mecca and conquers it. And then 2 years later, in 632, Muhammad died. At the end of his life, Muhammad had 13 wives or concubines who are all revered as, quote, mothers of the believers. Khadija, the older wife, was the first. Aisha was the third. And Maria the Copt, who had been a Christian, was the last of his wives. So we can see here that Muhammad's life basically breaks into two halves. There's the early part of his life in which he is, a merchant with his uncle traveling around. He marries an older woman, Khadijah, and he begins to have these troubling visions. He's also alleged to have had epilepsy, seizures. He has this strange vision with an angel of light, and his wife encourages him, says, no, this is the Archangel Gabriel. And so we see shortly after he begins a prophetic ministry. However, and it's not violent at the beginning, however, as time goes on and he's expelled from Mecca and he has to go to Medina, he begins to gather around himself the believers, and they take on a military culture. They begin to raid the caravans. They begin to seek vengeance against the people of Mecca who have driven him out, and eventually they come back and conquer Mecca through bloodshed. So that's the life of Muhammad. You can see, as Thomas Aquinas says, that it's characterized by lust. We would even say pedophilia, because of Aisha's age, being 9 years old, and also by bloodshed and war. So let's look at how Islam developed after Muhammad died. So as we just said, Muhammad died in 632. In 661, all the way up through 750, the caliphate of the Umayyad dynasty rules. Damascus becomes the capital of the caliphate. In 674, so this is just a little over 40 years after the death of Muhammad, Muslim armies reach the Indus River. They're expanding. 678, Muhammad's child bride, the one he married at 6 and consummated at 9 years old, she dies at age 64, and she's kind of seen as the last witness to Muhammad's life. In 691, the followers of Muhammad build the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount of Jerusalem. Why is this important? Well, they're taking the place where ancient Israel had their temple, was chosen by God, and there they build a mosque on top of it. There had previously been a Christian church there commemorating the place where the temple had been. Now we have a mosque. In 711, Muslims reach as far as Spain. In fact, they conquer the Spanish territories in 711, and the Muslims are not expelled until 1492. So over 700 years of occupation there in the Iberian Peninsula. In 732, on October 10th, Charles Martel wins the Battle of Tours, blocking Muslim invasion into France. We have to realize that the Muslims were coming from the east through what we know as Constantinople. They came all the way across North Africa, Spain, and were knocking into France as early as the 700s. It was Charles the Hammer, Charles Martel, who pushed them back. In 751, Muslims defeat the Chinese army in Central Asia and learn how to make paper from their prisoners of war. This is in the 700s still. In 935 to 939, we have the Islamic conquest of Genoa. In 972, we have Al-Azhar University, founded in Cairo, in Egypt, one of the oldest schools in the world, and named after Muhammad's daughter, Fatima. That's right, Fatima. And Fatima, Portugal, where Our Lady appeared, is named after Muhammad's daughter, Fatima. In 1055, the recently converted Turks take over Baghdad. This is important. Once we get to the 1000s, we see that not only do we have Arab Muslims, now we have Turkish Muslims. And in 1099, we have the First Crusade. Christians retake the city of Jerusalem, retake the Temple Mount, and most importantly, retake the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where Christ rose from the dead. And we'll dedicate a future New St. Thomas Institute lesson to this First Crusade and all the following crusades. In 1187, the Muslim general Saladin reconquers Jerusalem, taking it back away from the Christians. 1204, the conquest of the Mongols into Russia, Cilicia, Anatolia, Persia, and India. In 1236, we have the fall of Cordoba through Ferdinand III. Big win for the Christians. Around 1300, Marco Polo travels the Silk Road into China. In 1492, Spain becomes Catholic again. 1501, the Safavid Empire forms in Persia, making Shia dominant. Now there's two kinds of Islam, the Shiite and the Sunni. Persia becomes at this point Shiite. The remaining Muslim nations are primarily Sunni. In 1517, the very year in which Martin Luther in Europe is causing troubles, the Ottoman Turks unify the Near East, Egypt, Syria, and Arabia. 1520 to 1566, Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent shows the height of the Ottoman Turkish power. The Ottomans conquer Hungary in 1526. In 1529, the first siege of Vienna fails. Around 1600, the first Muslim state in the Indonesian islands is established. So all the way across the globe, we have Islam spreading. 1683, the second siege of Vienna fails. We can see Muslims trying to push into Europe from the east. In 1803 to 1818, we had the first rule of the strict sect of the Wahhabis in Arabia. This is really the founding of the more militant and terrorist-minded form of Islam. In 1920, the League of Nations grants Lebanon and Syria to France. In 1922 to 1932, Italy's final conquest of Libya. In 1923, we have the proclamation of the Turkish Republic. And this following year brings about the last Muslim caliph, Abdul Mecid II of Turkey. The caliphate, for the first time since the 1600s, is abolished. There is no more caliphate. This would be like for Christians, the abolition of the papacy. For the Muslims who see the church and the state, the religious and the secular, joined together, they see the leading ruler, the caliph, as the authority. There is, and has not been since 1924, a caliph. And in our contemporary situation, the Islamic State, ISIS, their primary goal is to reestablish the caliph. So if we understand this history, we understand what happened in 1924 in Turkey, we can understand the projected goals of the Islamic State. In 1928, we see the founding of the Muslim Brotherhood, an Egyptian group seeking an Islamic government. In 1946, Lebanon and the Syrian states gained freedom from the French, and Palestine and the Transjordan gained freedom from the British. In 1947, the Muslim nation of Pakistan is formed in its separation from India. In 1948, the State of Israel is formed from the formerly controlled British Palestine. This creates a massive diplomatic problem because we have an Israelite state surrounded by aggressive Muslim states. In 1953, Egypt becomes a republic. From 54 to 62, the Algerian War of Independence from France. In 1967, the Six-Day War, in which Israel quickly defeated the combined Arab forces of Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. Israel then occupied the West Bank of the Jordan River, the rest of Jerusalem, the Gaza Strip, and the Egyptian Sinai Peninsula. This was a bitter defeat for the Muslims. In 1972, we had the Palestinian Black September Organization kill 11 Israeli athletes at the Munich Games. Israel responds by bombing Palestinian refugee camps, killing 200 to 500 people. 1973, we have the Yom Kippur or Ramadan War, in which the Egyptians and Syrians attacked Israel. And though they gained little, Arab positions were strengthened. After that, the Arab nations drive world oil prices up. And of course, September 11th, 2011, we had the terrorist attack of Islamic violence against the United States. And that brings us basically to modern day. I didn't include the Islamic State attacks. I went through that long and tedious history of Islam just to show that its relationship with the rest of the world has always been one of violence, terror, and bloodshed. I wanted to show you that timeline because as we move into our study of the Crusades, it's absolutely essential that we understand that the Crusades were originally a defensive maneuver against Islamic aggression. When the Pope and when great saints like St. Bernard of Clairvaux begin to preach a crusade, they're not saying, let's go take gold, let's go take slaves, let's go take land from Muslim nation. They're saying, let us defend our people and let us reclaim what was ours against aggression from the East, and as it gets in Spain, even pushing in from the West. So that is Muhammad. That is the legacy. For those of us that want to continue to study, we'll have some recommended reading and some books in the notes below this video. I would encourage you, because of the times we live in, to study Islam. I read the Quran, I study it, not because I want to get spiritual enlightenment. I just want to understand how they think so that we can respond in the right way. I think it's important also as Christians that we try to convert Muslims. We need to show them the love of Jesus Christ, that the gospel is the gospel of mercy and of truth, and that God is not a tyrant. He's not a warrior. God is a father, and he sent his son. Hey, thanks so much for being a member of the New St. Thomas Institute, and we'll see you in the next video lesson. God bless.